12, 13, 14 hours a day. So it's not just lengthening.
So 8 to 8 or something like that?
Yes, and let me tell you what, not just lengthening obviously the school day, but a wide variety of after-school activities. At home we attached healthcare clinics to about 24 of our schools. Where schools truly become the centers of the community, great things happen. So I think we need the schools open much longer hours.
So keep them open 12 hours a day, 12 months a year?
Yes.
12 hours a day, 12 months a year?
And I would go to 6 or 7 days a week, not just Monday through Friday.
7 days a week.
Schools
so the school becomes a center of community life.
Where the school becomes a center of community life, great things are going to happen for those families and great things are going to happen for those children.
Then tell me why that hasn't happened before.
My name is Lydia Gutierrez, and I want to give you some examples of what's happening, but also I'm going to be covering over some laws that have passed that regards to public education. I have a saying that goes like this: Common Core is a theory, licensed as a product, marketed as a standard. Now, you're wondering, why do I call it a theory? You've just heard the explanation of that. It was never vetted, internationally, nationally, or statewide. A theory is an idea, a thought, but it needs to be tested. And what we gave up when we took Common Core, we gave up our scientific research database. And what happens is when a curriculum is developed or when the standards are developed, it takes years because they go through academic research. They go through research concerning effective classroom practices, field testing research, learner verification research. So in other words, they're collecting data. They're putting it in journals. They take it, after it's in the journals, they take it out to retest it again to verify that it still will be cognitively, developmentally appropriate for your child. Now, that's just the standards. And then from there, the curriculum is developed. So you're talking about if you take a stairwell, that at each level, it is a concrete base. First kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, they are aligned to each other. Now, when Common Core came together, as you heard, it only took 6 months to throw it all together and package it and give it to every state. There was no scientific database developed. So what you have is basically quicksand, especially for the foundation of our children, which is very important. Now, I called it a license as a product. How many know that it is a product? And how many do not know it's a product? Well, if you go to the website and put in, Google it, Common Core license, it will come out as a 2-pager, and it states right there in the license that it's a product and it's owned by the National Governors Association and the Council of Chief Officers of State Schools. And those two organizations are trade organizations. They're not legislative bodies, that they can have minutes or agenda and receive donations. You'll never know that, because it's a nonprofit organization. So from there, these two groups decided to give us Common Core. And if you're not aware of it, Sandra gave you the word Achieve Inc. Well, Achieve Inc. was then Bill Gates' way of funneling his money to all the nonprofit organizations. And PTA received money. Every educational nonprofit organization received money. You have the Teachers Association of, the California Teachers Association received money. The NEA received money, National Education Association received money. And they said, "You like Common Core?" And they all said, "Yes, we love Common Core." And if you haven't heard about it, but PTA, when it first came out, and parents in New York were starting to opt out their children, they literally threatened the parents and said, "We will report you to social services." So that is a documented proof, because they even stated it in one of their papers. But the product, when you read it, you're going to find out that it says that they're not liable for anything. You can never sue them. And they can change it at any time, the wording, and even the title of it. Many of you heard about Alaska not adopting Common Core. Well, they called it Alaska State Standards instead of Common Core State Standards. And all they did was change some of the words. And the reason why you know that they are teaching Common Core or aligned to Common Core, because if they're having the same smart balanced tests on the Western side that we are, well, obviously they must be doing something similar to us. And the last one is, I call it marketed as a standard. Now the thing is that you have the opportunity when you talk to your family, your friends, or whatever, and they talk about Common Core standard, you say, no, I'm sorry, it's Common Core theory. Correct them. And that gives you the open door to start explaining. Now, in California, we have a governor and a state superintendent that's been talking about college and career readiness for the 21st century. And you say, where's the readiness? It's actually the dead end of the 21st century. Because you've already heard that trigonometry and calculus is not a part of our Common Core standards theory, okay? You need those two courses for you to be STEM ready, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It's not there. So every district has to decide if they're going to have those courses. And if that district isn't covering those courses, the day they graduate, they will have to go to a community college. And we already know that the international students already have front row seats because they pay more than our children do. So they have to wait in line. And that's why there's going to be an overcrowding. And then we go to the career readiness part. Well, you know what? Governor Brown closed down 72 vocational schools last year. Those adult educational programs were tied into the K-12. And what happens was our children, when they were in high school, were able to take courses at the adult educational school and then go back to their classes, their regular classes, and get credit for them, graduate, and have a skill prepared. They were ready to move on with their lives. Totally wiped out. Now, what they're doing now is they're saying, oh, we have grant money for vocational training. Well, you know what? Grant money you have to ask for. It's limited, and it runs out. And anyone with 2 cents of a brain knows that when you have a vocational class, that it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to have that room because you're talking metal shop, wood shop, and so forth. It has a lot in it. So the thing is that they have limited our children in every which way possible. Now, how many of you have heard of local control funding formula? All right. How many have gone to your school districts and heard their explanations and things like that? How many have never heard of local control funding formula? Okay. Let me explain it to you. What happened was we used to have categorical fundings, saying we had to spend money on this category, that category, whatever it was. But now, every school district is going to get a base fund. And from there, you get extra money if you have foster children, English language learners, and low-income children. With that extra money, you get to sit down. The district is supposed to call parents in, and you get to discuss what you're going to do with that extra money. Now, we're talking about adult education, nurses, librarians, custodians. Does anyone see a problem with that? That's your infrastructure. Those things should already be in the base funding. They should not be an elected choice of what you want. For example, I teach at a school that has 1,200 children. We have one nurse part-time. On the other half of the week, she goes to another school with 1,200 children. One nurse. And she has to be the one responsible for all the medical concerns of all our children. So the thing is that in that AB 97, I'm going to give you a page number, and write it down. Page number 100, number 2. It says right in there, implementation of academic content and performance standards adopted by the state, including how the programs and services will enable English language learners to accept Common Core academic content development standards. Now, there's a number, 60605.8, and from that states here, the Commission shall develop academic content standards in English, arts, mathematics. The standards shall be internationally benchmarked. Now, this is where the loophole is. It's never been benchmarked internationally. AB 250 states, when we adopted the math and the language arts, stated it had to be internationally benchmarked. It never has been. So right there, I believe we have some grounds, and that needs to truly be investigated. The other part, too, is the war on poverty in 1964 and 65, Lyndon Johnson created the war on poverty for our low-income children, because they had, as you know, they were segregated, and in those schools, they didn't have high-quality standards. And to help them, they said, we're going to make sure you have scientifically vetted standards. And so from that time on until last year, that was a qualifier to receive any federal funding. That was a part of No Child Left Behind. And just to make sure you understand, No Child Left Behind has to deal with testing, has nothing to do with the implementation of standards. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with our curriculum or anything like that. To receive the money, we had to show that we were improving academically, and that's how we got the federal funding. But in Title I, Provision 9 states, any standard before a child has to be scientifically vetted, or you're breaking their civil rights. And that's being completely ignored. Now, many of you have heard about the breadth over depth. How many have heard that expression, right? Okay. Well, like I said, I'm a public school teacher, and my district, if you're not aware of it, and this is where the big joke is, you know, how we're supposed to be all common, right? Common Core. And what happens is, just last year, we had established educational publishers. Because you could see through that explanation when you have to do such at-depth research. I have right here about 17 pages of research was done, you know, everyday mathematics, you know, concentrated research. And when you go to the back of the book of the math standards for Common Core, this is a sample of works consulted. There was no research. In other words, they literally took books and stacked them up and looked through them and tried to figure out how to develop our standards. But the thing is that when you teach a child, and all those teachers that raise their hand understand exactly what I'm saying, you have to gradually, to get where you want to get to the depth, you have to gradually teach one little step to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. And that's how our curriculum was developed. Our lessons, through all that thick research that they did, would show lesson gradually builds to the next, to the next, to the next. When they threw that out, where everybody was writing curriculum, I don't know if you heard about on the computer, on the internet, there was a nonprofit organization that decided they were going to get into the Common Core curriculum business and put on Craigslist if you would, they were looking for a math teacher or a math writer to write curriculum for them. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was getting. So what happens is because we have to gradually get to those steps, then we can get to the depth. But with Common Core, it was just, you know, a manhole drop without the ladder for our children. So I'm going to give you some examples of some of the things that I had to experience. And like I said, my district decided to write their own curriculum. Anyone in the state can use any kind of curriculum they want. Okay? You got, like I said, just last year, we had these established, scientifically vetted standards that, you know, Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, you know, very concrete, established publishers that, as you remember, if your school boards, they would say, we have our new curriculum, would like for you to review it. We're going to select what series we're going to use. How many have ever been a part of that? Okay, well, that's gone because they don't know what they're going to use the following year because everyone's writing something. So here's some examples I have. So here it is. My children have a math problem where they have to, what two numbers will give you the difference of 23? Now, I have to explain to the children the word difference, don't I? Now, half of my kids are English language learners. They're only 7 years old. And so they give them a spin wheel of 10 different numbers. And so they have to figure out what two numbers will give them the difference of 23. So you can imagine this little 7-year-old trying to figure out all these numbers. Of course, it'd be overwhelming to them. And then besides finding the answer, they have to write down and explain it. Okay? Another one is like, now they're into the number line. And what they've done is, since I've taught from kindergarten to 8th grade, when the number line, when you're starting to teach them, you show them the little bunny hops, or the frog hops or the cricket hops, whatever it is, and you show by a little arrow. You show them what direction you're going for addition and subtraction. Well, what they did was, for my little 7-year-olds, is that they give them a number line, which is humps, no direction. And they don't even give them a solid number line, but it's a number line that may skip by 10s or by 15s. And the kids have to figure out what is the correct subtraction problem for it, or addition problem, by the humps. And what they've done is they give them large spaces and short spaces. So then they have to figure out the large spaces, could that be a 10? And the short space, could that be a 1? With no guidance, because there's not numbers underneath those humps. And then on top of that, when they figure it out, then they have to write out how they figured it out, okay? And then the last part is now the kids, besides, when you're dealing with, developing mindsets, their cognitive development, they have to have foundation. They really don't have the reasoning skills. But now they have to figure out what answers are correct, okay? So they'll get this list of answers. Now, and we usually have just one right answer, especially at this age. Well, now they have to figure out, it may be 2 answers right, it may be 3 answers right. They may all be right. So if they answered just one problem, they may still get it wrong because they didn't answer the other 2 that were correct. So you could see the serious problems that we have. Now, one other thing is that I'm hearing from a lot of teachers is that they are taking out the AP, Honor, and GATES classes throughout the state because they say they cost too much and they need the funding for Common Core. My district decided that this year, because when I found out we were going to teach Common Core, I ran for office for state superintendent 4 years ago, and I came in 4th out of 12. And when I was in the process of investigating this, because I've been aware of it for quite a long time, and I said, okay, what are my rights? I went right to my unit and said, what are my rights? And they said, Lydia, you're in luck, because our contract are still part of last year's standards. So what I've been doing is teaching them last year's standards while I'm teaching them this year so they'll be prepared for next year. And but what my district did, because they know of that, we cannot use a report card to evaluate them with Common Core standards because legally we're not bound to them, right? So what we're doing is a progress report card. And they've changed the wording to say that instead of proficient, they've changed it to adequate. And as you know, proficient means you know it, you're strong at it. Adequate means you're barely there at a minimum level. So this is some of the things that we're dealing with. And my last part, and just giving you an example, my children, as you know, that 50% language arts we're supposed to do. And I had an interview with the LA Times. And I was explaining to her, I said, you don't realize that when it comes to language arts, that literacy part is very, very developmentally important for them. This is their creativity, their imagination. This is where you're going to develop a child's interest to read. And when they said to us, okay, you're going to take this is my literacy books, okay? Like if you can take that. And if you put on this side my history, social studies, health, art book, music book, those are all nonfiction. But you're taking my little literacy books and you're saying I have to do 50% nonfiction, 50% fiction. So they literally cut it in half and put it over here. So now my children, during reading time, we have to do research. And they have to write opinion papers. 3-paragraph opinion papers, that's 7. Okay, and so the ridiculous is too real. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Lydia Gutierrez, and I look forward to answering some of your questions. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Stotsky and Lydia. Lydia, thank you. And thank you, Brad, very much for coming tonight and giving us your time. And I'd like to share a quote from Ronald Reagan. "Freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them to do the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children what it once was like in the United States where men were free."